All right. Hi, Seth.
How you doing, bud?
Thank you for coming on the podcast.
I'm so glad to be here, my friend.
So, Seth Juarez.
Yes, you can. In Spanish, it's Juarez.
Juarez.
In English, we just say Juarez, like Juarez. That's it. Like if it was with a W, and usually it's because people have a hard time with the R in Spanish. I don't know why it is. It's kind of a funny, but not so much.
Yeah, well, I apologize.
No, I don't care. You can call me whatever you want. I'm just glad to be here, my friend.
You call yourself a cloud developer advocate at Microsoft.
Correct.
But the reason I said that is I just overheard a conversation before, and I hear you've got a very deep machine learning experience.
So I know what I don't know, and I know what I want to learn.
Sure.
And so you know how like I don't like to label myself as like an expert because I don't feel like I am. But I have spent a long time looking at machine learning models. I'm good at computer vision. I did some NLP when I was doing research, but I always feel like there's more to be learned. So I don't like the term expert because I feel like
Sure.
it gives me undue cred that maybe I don't deserve.
Okay, sure. But yeah, I guess. Okay, so we'll get to what you do know.
Cool.
Then.
I love it.
But like honestly, there's so much to learn in machine learning.
Oh yeah,
it's like
no question.
It'll be never ending, I think. So getting to what you do know.
Okay.
So this podcast is called The Humans of AI.
Oh, okay.
The idea behind it is I want to hear your story, how you first got started in tech.
Oh, I love it.
And then how you went from that journey into machine learning.
Great.
And then progressed your career, and finally what you're doing right now.
That's great. That's awesome. I'm actually excited to talk about that. So I'll tell you, when I was like 14 years old, we had a 486 DX4100 machine in my basement. And back in the day in the United States, we didn't have these laws like HIPAA laws, etc. But my dad was a doctor, and he kept all of his medical records backed up on the machine in a private space that I couldn't access. But one day I was doing something with the machine and I crashed it. And what happened was, now my dad came downstairs, he's like, Seth, I need you to bring this back. And I was like, okay. And so I figured it out, and I got a knack for computering, as I like to call it sometimes. And it was really cool because I felt like I was empowered to do amazing things in computers after I was able to fix this computer. I was able to get us out of a problem. And then after that, I started networking the things together. You know, back in the day, we had this weird cable with the internet where it was called 10 base T, and you had to hook it up in a weird way. And at the end, you had to cap it because otherwise the internet would fall out. I don't know what, but I figured out you had to cap it.
So and just to set timelines, what roughly year are we talking about?
I was like 14 or 15.
So 90.
It was 94.
94.
95. Yeah, okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, 94, 95. Maybe a little bit after. I don't remember. My head is fuzzy, right? And so after that, I started building websites because I got really, when I was in college, I was like, oh, I could build a website. And it was cool to put something out. And then people started asking me to do it, and they would pay me, which was really cool. And so eventually I got a job at a startup called Purchase Pro, which was B2B e-commerce, which was very new at the time. And I remember I did something.
So again, roughly what year are we?
98.
Okay, cool. So really early days of the internet.
Yeah, early days. And so I went to that place, and I was like a support guy, I think. And then like all of a sudden I did some thing with OCX and I don't know, Office or whatever. I figured something out. And one of the programmers came over to me, like, because the programmers, they had like their special area, and it's not that I couldn't talk to them because it wasn't like that, but I felt like, oh, these are the people that are making the thing that I'm supporting. He said to me, Seth, you should be a programmer. This is really good. And that stuck with me. I was majoring currently at the time in civil engineering, and I decided, I think I don't want to play with dirt the rest of my life. So I switched over to computer science, and I did my undergrad degree in computer science, and then I got a job at a place called Holman's of Nevada, which is where I did a lot of consulting. And I was made the senior dev, and we solved problems with code. And they were super impressed because they were like, wow, if they have a problem, you can just solve it with code. And we did. And we started in the early days of .NET. This had to be like 2000 something. And I just became a .NET dev for like, I don't know, a long time. I moved and started grad school because I wanted to learn more about computer science. And I took a class. This had to be 2008, 7, 6, 5, 4. 2004, 2005.
Yep.
I took a class in machine learning.
Okay.
My professor's name was Dr. Hal Dalmay. And I remember going to his office once.
Sorry, whereabouts were you? I should have actually backed up a bit. Whereabouts are you from in the States?
I was born in San Diego, California. But the time where the computer stuff happened in my basement, that was in Nevada, Las Vegas, Nevada. And then I went to University of Utah, which is really famous for like Pixar. All the tech from Pixar came out of there. And so I went to my professor's office. His name was Hal Dalmay. And
this is in Utah?
This is at University of Utah. And I said, Dr. Dalmay, he's like, don't call me that, man. Call me Hal. And all of a sudden I got this sense for like, that's why I have this sense of like, I recognize that my professor, knowing way more than I ever did, said, don't call me doctor. He also had this sense that there was so much more to learn. And that's where that's why I answered, right?
It's the best place to be, though.
Yeah. And so I remember going to his class one time, and we were learning an algorithm called K-means. And if anyone's listening and they're AI, that's like this dumbest, simplest, but powerful algorithm.
It's the little engine that could
exactly
of the machine learning world.
Yeah. And as you know, it's literally just like measuring distances and then coming to an equilibrium. But I remember I implemented it in MATLAB because that was the assignment. And I watched the thing like two little marbles circling around two little holes in a table and actually learning to cluster things. And I was at once fascinated that it could learn something and at once shocked that it wasn't. It was basically just math.
Completely understand.
Yeah, and I looked at it and that both awe and dismay. Well, it wasn't dismay because but that awe and that understanding that I knew exactly what was happening and yet it still provided this wonder to me. That's when I got hooked on machine learning, right? And then I'm like, this is what I want to keep studying. Because I was in a doctoral program at the time, and I did some research. And I remember as I was going, I did NLP, and we were working on.
So K-means roughly when was that?
That was probably right at the beginning of grad school, like 2004.
Cool.
2005.
And then when did you start your PhD?
That was when I was at my PhD. That was when I started grad school.
Grad school is
different
terminology.
Graduate school for us is either your master's or your PhD. I was in there for a PhD. And so as I was going and I started doing research, I was working on this interesting problem of trying to match words from different languages. I did machine translation. And we had this idea, and my professor told me to go try it out. And we were trying to match words from two documents that were parallel but in different languages and be able to automatically say, oh, these two words are the same word in different languages. And we're using this really interesting mathematical thing called the Hilbert-Schmidt independence criteria. And we're trying to minimize that over a set of words. And to do that, you had to implement what is called a QP solver, which is a quadratic programming problem in linear algebra. And it requires you to optimize over a large space. And the way you do is you have to generate the curvature of the whole thing, which required this huge matrix called the Hessian. And so instead of generating the Hessian, which was ginormous, because I had like 15,000 features, I had to fake it, right? And so as I'm implementing this, I implemented it in MATLAB, and it didn't work. I implemented it in Python. It didn't work. I implemented it in some
Python
other
in 2005.
Yeah, 2006, and it didn't work, and it just didn't work. And I worked on this for 8 months. And I go to my professor, and I'm like, "Hey, Hal," because I didn't call him doctor. I said, "Hey, Hal, this isn't working." He's like, "Oh." I'm like, "Well, what should I do?" He's like, "I don't know, Seth. No one's ever done this before." And I was like, oh, I understand what this kind of school is now. And I kept working on it. And my colleague, Jagdish Jagalamurthy, who's just an amazing guy, he came to me, he said, hey, Seth, can I take some of the research you've been doing and maybe we can write a paper together? I'm sure. And so what he did is he down-leveled what I was trying to do, and he published a paper on it, and he put my name on it because obviously he was giving me credit. And it's the only paper that I have with my name on it from, that was actually accepted to a conference.
What conference was that?
I don't remember.
That's okay.
But I'll find it. If you do Seth Juarez and Jagdish and then NLP, or you'll find it because it's the only one. And I learned, it was at that time that I figured out that research wasn't about solving a huge problem. It was about failing at huge problems and writing papers about what you learned along the way. And it was at that point that Hal got a much better offer to work at the University of Maryland at College Park. And he said, hey, you want to come with me? And I'm like, no, I got a family. And so it was at that point that I was like, okay, I'm done. But they gave me a master's. So I was there for about 4 years doing research. After 2 years, they gave me a master's, and then I was there another 2 years. But it was at that moment in time that I realized that research is really about failing and writing papers along the way. And I was like, dang it, right when I understood this whole PhD thing, I had to stop. So then I got a job back with doing .NET stuff, but I was very interested in machine learning. And so I started writing a machine learning library, which is quite old now, called NewML, which was a playoff of a package manager called NuGet, which is
something like 2007?
Yeah, we're at like 2008.
Oh.
2008. Yep. And I went and spoke at a conference in Tennessee. And I remember it was the first time I had ever taught .NET folks machine learning. And there wasn't a lot of people there, right? And this is 2008, right? Because it's like now everyone goes to the machine learning stuff, right? And so I was talking about all of these, and when I approached it, it was a 3-hour, like a 2 90-minute sessions. And I treated it like if it was a graduate seminar. And so I was like getting into math and showing algorithms, and I was like, I think I've done too much, right? Because if it's something that's new to you, there is some mathiness. It's not hard math, but there is some. And if you're not familiar with the notation or you've never seen it before, it takes some getting used to.
It's intimidating. It's another language.
Yeah, and so it was at that point that I recognized that there's got to be a better way to explain these concepts to someone that wants to get into it. Because it feels like there's this ginormous barrier of, I need to know linear algebra and multivariable calculus to do this right. Well, you do, but it turns out that you don't need to understand it in an academic way. And that's my firm belief. And for 10 years, I've been trying to make these concepts digestible. And I do that at Microsoft with the AI show. I do it also when I explain our products. I do it also when I help advocate on behalf of our customers, because now my job is I help developers be successful with AI in the cloud. And majority of times we use our products if we can. If not, we suggest whatever you can use. And so that was my little fun journey, right? From fixing a computer because my dad needed his files back, to looking at the K-means algorithm with both wonder and shock that I understood it, and then understanding in Chattanooga, Tennessee, at a conference called Code Stock, which was really fun, that these concepts are not so foreign that the average developer, which I consider myself to be, could understand it.
Okay.
So yeah, that's my story. I don't think I've ever told anyone the story that long. There's a lot of friends that I have everywhere.
What happened in the what do they call the 20 tweens or whatever they're called? What did you do in that around?
So from 2000 until I went to grad school, I was literally a programmer, a senior software dev. And then I wrote like ASP.NET 1 applications. So it's just a standard dev. It turns out that during the day, they would let me go and do grad school. And so it was there that I learned that machine learning is an incredibly powerful technique to write the unwritable algorithms, so to speak.
100%.
Yeah, and so that's and when you say it like that, people are like, oh, well, what do you mean unwritable? Well, there's certain algorithms that everyone writes where they know that it feels a little squishy. They have to add an if statement. They have to change numbers. A few
if statements.
Yeah, or they have to change a 0.5 and it works to a 0.7. It is that particular squishy smell for a developer that they should probably think, this is squishy, machine learning will be better for it. And that's how I've been trying to teach it to people.
Yeah, I think that's a good approach.
Yeah.
Cool. So so you talked a little bit before about what you do at Microsoft. Are you able to are you work in the advocacy?
Yeah, let me tell you more about that. So my job, again, is to help developers be successful with AI in the cloud. That's my job. So what does that mean? It turns out that at Microsoft, we have, and we should, a lot of product-focused people that build amazing products. Our job, but if you think about it in terms of like verticals, imagine product X is this one vertical and product Y is this other vertical. Mm-hmm. My job is to cross them horizontally and help customers find solutions to challenges.
100%.
And so the way we do that is we're like the API between the customer and the product group. So, for example, I will go and give a talk at Ignite, and someone will come up to me and say, "Hey, that's great, but," and that's where I'm like, I want to hear what they don't like, because that is the most interesting thing to me, because it's the most actionable. And we are 100% customer obsessed. If a customer comes up to me and says, "That's great, but I actually do this," and then 2, and then 3, then what I do is I go to the product groups, plural, and I say, "Hey, the solutions you're building are great, but they don't integrate well. Or they need to do more of this or more of that." And I specifically focus on everything having to do with AI. So that because we build so many of those kinds of products, my job is to help customers rationalize our offering in a way that solves their problems. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%.
Cool.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. So we're recording at Ignite.
That's
for
right.
those people that can't have.
Yeah, you can't hear the dog behind us. It was awesome.
The bit of cheering in the background. What are your thoughts on the conference so far? How have you found it?
So I have a really kind of a weird perspective, because I don't go to many sessions, right?
Yeah. But from the perspective you're perceiving.
Yeah, I think it's great. Like, the energy here is amazing. The amount of people here is really cool. The stuff that's been presented has been very well received. I just did a talk this morning on converting unstructured data to structured data using AI, and I thought it was great. But then again, I might be biased. But I think it's great, and I think we're moving more towards an era of where AI is an accepted thing,
100%,
as something that should be used.
Yep.
And it's not like when I gave talks like 10 years ago, and like 3 people showed up, and they'd be like, "When would I ever use this?" And now everyone knows they need to, and they're still thinking, "When do I ever use this?" But they want to know, right? And now they didn't. Before they didn't want to know, but now they do. And so I'm actually pretty excited about the state of things.
Have you given your talk yet?
Yeah, I just gave it like literally right before I came. It was cool. I had a good time. It was a problem where the boss deleted the database accidentally, and I showed how to use AI to reconstruct the entire sales database using only the invoices that were generated.
Okay.
And it was really fun. It uses a combination of tools, Azure Search, Python, Azure Functions, Form Recognizer Service, among other things like storage, etc.
Cool. Because I wanted to ask you a question about that before. You said you're in the advocacy group, which was the API which bridges the customer's problems to the tools that Azure has. Uh-huh. At a conference, whether it's Ignite or anywhere else, what is the most I don't know if without naming names or whatever, but what is some exciting problems that you've had to sort of deal with?
So that's a good question. Generally, the most exciting problem is that people are excited about AI, but they don't know where to start.
Okay.
And we build so many good things that when they all of a sudden people say, "Hey, I need to use AI," they think I need to use TensorFlow, right, and do like a ResNet 50. No, I mean, you don't have to. You can do all of these other things, because we have a ton of amazing services that lets you just call AI and use it. And so the problem that people are having is they know they should do something there. They don't know what to do. And that is a much better problem than I had before, which is people are interested. People are very interested. And now they're trying to figure out, how does this tool work in my arsenal of software tools?
Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Speaking of which,
yep.
You mentioned like we're entering a kind of a new phase of AI, machine learning, whatever you want to call it. And part of that, I think, is it's now becoming like a whole. Azure is a prime example of this, where you have a whole bunch of essentially microservices. Like, I don't know, there'll be an NLP one, time series one, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think that's the future of the field, like making it more accessible through tooling like that?
Absolutely. Look, I mean, no one bats an eye when they download if you're a C# dev, a NuGet package or an assembly or a jar file. You're not quite sure how it does what it does, but you know what it does, and you still incorporate it into your daily software builds, right? The same thing can be said of wrapped AI services, or, I mean, basically, most people, well, your audience probably knows this, but the AI is basically protobuf files and HDF5 files or zip files or whatever. It's basically the same concept. It's just called a little bit different from code. And so I can envision a situation where people get really good at producing AI to solve specific problems, and people just load them up like they have from time immemorial as a jar file, as a NuGet package or whatever. And that's the beginning of what we're seeing now with the proliferation of cognitive services, where people are solving AI problems and then letting others enjoy the benefits. Kind of like you would download a grid and use it. I mean, nobody wants to write a grid. And if you do, then you should probably be in the business of writing grids because it takes a long time to do and maintain. Same thing can be said for certain AI things. But for customized AI that is specific to business, there is enough frameworks and tooling to be able to easily and quickly try stuff, which I think is awesome. For example, for us, we have something called automated machine learning, which literally you can give it an Excel spreadsheet, say, learn this column, and go. And it will just do it, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. So, again, in the advocacy group, you're connecting the problems to this tooling, which we just talked about. Yeah.
And the thing about it is, like, everyone's problems are unique, but you start to surface a pattern of, like, there's some things we want to solve, we don't know how to do it, and it feels like the majority of the problems that I see people finding is just literally awareness of what you can and can't do.
So to be slightly selfish here, I come from the data science world where I import Python packages to do stuff.
Yeah.
And kind of the conversation here is about like moving from that to microservices a little bit.
Yeah.
How do you feel? What's the best way to go about? Because like one of the reasons I haven't mainly engaged the microservice approach yet is it's just like finding out when I need to use tool X or Y or Z.
Right.
So is it just attending conferences? Is it YouTube?
So
is it?
If you're wondering, if your listeners are wondering, like, I just want to take advantage of the services.
Exactly.
If you go to cognitive services, we basically say, here are all the things you can do. Yeah. Here's all the things you can customize, and this is how you do it. So I would just Google with Bing cognitive services and see what's there. Now, you might say that I am a special snowflake and I have to do something else. Then we have services for that too, like Azure Machine Learning Service that will let you end-to-end build custom models with Python, specifically TensorFlow, PyTorch, Scikit-learn, whatever you want. And so we can cover you almost all ways. And so
it's heaps of documentation.
What's that?
Heaps of documentation.
Oh yeah, we have.
That's also been one of my biggest with microservices.
In our opinion, like, it's not a product until it's got a doc, right? I mean, there's no other way to, like, if a tree falls in the forest, right, and no one reads the doc, who cares, right? And it's the same thing with services. So
cool. Seth, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, just that for those of your listeners that are interested in AI and machine learning specifically, I think it's fun. I think it's great, and sometimes it's a little painful when it doesn't work, but when it does, it's absolute exhilaration. And if you're thinking that sounds like a programmer, it basically is. Yeah. And so anyone can learn this discipline. It just takes a little bit of time, just like you took a little bit of time. Like, for example, I'm terrified of React. And,
Tell me about it.
Right, and so and I feel like what I've got in machine learning is probably a little simpler. And if you know React, you're like, that can't be true. Well, it is. Everything has its own unique hardness. But if you just want to get started, I would look to cognitive services.
Cool. Seth Juarez.
Yeah, beautiful.
Been a pleasure, mate.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, man. Cheers.